In the next 2 minutes, you're going to witness how a 64-year-old janitor, fired and forgotten, turned the tables on a billion-dollar company with nothing but grit, grief, and a killer property loophole. Franklin Cole gave 34 years to Grayson Steele. No complaints, no shortcuts. Just steel, sweat, and silence. But when he was let go just months before his pension kicked in, they didn't just steal his retirement. They underestimated him. While they celebrated cutting costs, Franklin was cashing in every chip he had. His tools, old mementos, even his late wife's wedding ring. Working nights, researching deeds, and hunting down a hidden flaw in their empire. What he found? A gold mine. They didn't own the factory, he bought it. And when they got the eviction notice, signed by the man they erased, they panicked. This is not just a revenge story. This is a reckoning. Before you watch, hit subscribe for more powerful stories where the underestimated rise and the arrogant fall. Let's dive in. Franklin Cole's welding torch hissed as he finished the final seam of the day, the blue-white flame cutting through the dim factory glow. His hands, leathery and scarred from decades of sparks, moved with the same steady precision they had since 1987. 2 more months, he thought, rolling his stiff shoulders. 65 in 3 weeks. And then, finally, that pension he'd been promised since the Reagan administration. Around him, Grayson Steele's night shift clattered on, forklift engines coughing, the foreman's shrill whistle signaling break time. The air smelled of burnt metal and old grease, a scent so deep in Franklin's clothes that Marla used to joke she could find him in the dark just by sniffing. He wiped his forehead with a bandana, the red fabric gray from years of sweat and soot. "Cole, you deaf!" Franklin turned to see Rodriguez from quality control holding up his last weld. The younger man squinted, then gave a thumbs up. "Clean as a preacher's Sunday shirt," Franklin smirked. "Ain't preachers I'm trying to impress?" He patted the steel beam like it was a stubborn mule. This one was heading to the new airport expansion. His work would outlive him by decades. The thought warmed him more than the torch ever had. The intercom buzzed, static cutting through the din. "Franklin Cole, report to HR immediately." Rodriguez froze. "The hell?" Franklin's gut tightened. HR didn't call night shift welders at 10:17 p.m. for good news. He unclipped his safety harness, fingers lingering on the worn leather belt he'd bought the year Marla was born. "You want me to come with?" Rodriguez asked. Franklin shook his head. "Ain't nobody firing you today." The joke landed like a lead balloon. As he walked past the time clock, its numbers glowing green in the dark, Franklin didn't punch out, just in case. The walk to HR felt longer than usual, Franklin's steel-toed boots scuffing against the concrete floor with each step. He passed the break room where he'd eaten lunch at the same table for 17 years, the vending machine that always ate his dollar bills, the safety poster with his own handwriting on the inspection log. Every familiar sight suddenly felt like something he might be saying goodbye to. Ms. Esposito from HR was waiting, her manicured fingers tapping against a manila folder. The office smelled like lemon disinfectant and stale coffee. Franklin recognized the plant in the corner. He'd helped move it to better light 3 years ago when he'd been fixing the leak in their ceiling. "Franklin," she said, not unkindly, "have a seat." He remained standing, arms crossed over his chest. "Rather hear what this is about first." The folder opened with a crisp sound. Inside, Franklin saw numbers. Too many numbers, none of them good. "We're restructuring the welding team," Miss Esposito said, sliding a check across the desk. The amount was exactly 6 weeks' pay. Effective immediately. Franklin's hands stayed at his sides. "I got 2 months till retirement. Early retirement packages were last quarter." She wouldn't meet his eyes. "This is, different." The silence stretched. Somewhere down the hall, a copier jammed, its mechanical whine piercing the tension. Franklin focused on the framed company values behind her head, integrity printed in bold letters. "You know I was here when this was still Grayson & Sons," he said quietly. "Back when old man Grayson walked the floor every Friday." Miss Esposito's pen clicked. "The severance includes my pension." Franklin's voice cracked like a whip. "What about my pension?" Her throat worked. "Vested employees. 34 years ain't vested?" The air conditioning kicked on. ruffling the papers between them. Franklin watched a single drop of condensation roll down his untouched water bottle. Miss Esposito finally looked up. "We can have security help you clear your locker." The security guard, a kid Franklin had trained on a forklift safety last spring, wouldn't meet his eyes as he escorted him off the property. The contents of Franklin's locker fit in a single cardboard box. His spare coveralls, a chipped coffee mug with "World's Best Dad" fading where his fingers had worn the print away, and the retirement countdown calendar he'd been marking off every shift since January. Rain slapped against the pavement as Franklin stepped outside, the sudden wetness shocking after decades of climate-controlled factory air. He shifted the box to one hip, fumbling for the umbrella he kept in his lunch pail. Then remembered he'd left the pail behind in his hurry. The cold seeped through his jacket as he started the 17-block trudge home. At the bus stop, the Grayson steel billboard loomed overhead, its LED lights gleaming through the downpour. Grayson Steel, building the future. Since 1952. The since 1952 part was new. Franklin remembered when they'd added that during the rebrand last year, the same week they'd cut the graveyard shift's hazard pay. A bus splashed by without stopping, its wheels throwing a curtain of dirty water across the sidewalk. Franklin sidestepped too late, feeling the damp crawl up his work pants. He spat on the pavement, the tobacco-brown saliva swirling into the rainwater rushing toward the gutter. His fingers found the folded severance check in his breast pocket, already going soft at the edges from the humidity. 6 weeks' pay. After 34 years, the math stuck in his throat like a bone. He'd made Grayson approximately $28 million in profit over his career, give or take. And here he stood, waiting for a bus in the rain with a soggy box of scraps. A car honked. Franklin looked up to see Rodriguez leaning out of his ancient Civic, windshield wipers slapping furiously. "Jesus, old man, you trying to catch pneumonia?" Franklin's knees creaked as he bent to slide the box onto the back seat. The car smelled of fry grease and baby wipes. Rodriguez had twin toddlers at home. "Thought you had another hour on shift," Franklin said as the heater blasted his damp socks. Rodriguez's grip tightened on the wheel. "Told him my kid was sick." He didn't mention the security cameras had caught him flipping off the HR office windows on his way out. The radio played a tinny pop song as they drove past the shuttered diner where Franklin used to get his morning coffee. The neon open sign had burned out years ago. The apartment smelled like the fried bologna sandwich Franklin had burned earlier, charred meat and regret. He tossed his keys on the counter, watching them skid across the laminate surface and clatter against the microwave. The blinking red light on his landline told him Marla had called. Again. He should call her back. Tell her what happened. But right now, the thought of saying the words out loud, fired, pension gone, 34 years for nothing, made his throat close up like a rusted valve. The TV murmured to itself in the corner, some infomercial about real estate investing. A slick-haired man in a too-tight suit gestured wildly at a whiteboard. "You don't need money to make money." Franklin snorted, reaching for the remote. His thumb hovered over the power button as the man continued. "Distressed properties, bank foreclosures. The system's rigged, but you can rig it back." Franklin's hand dropped. He fished his reading glasses from his shirt pocket, the left arm held together with electrical tape. The numbers on screen danced. $15,000 down payments, 10% return on investment, tax lien auctions. Nonsense, probably. But then again, everything had been nonsense since 10:17 p.m. The fridge hummed in the silence. Inside, a six-pack of Schlitz, half a lemon, and a Ziploc bag of collard greens Marla had brought over Sunday. "You gotta eat better, Daddy," she'd said, like he wasn't the one who taught her to cook in the first place. Franklin cracked open a beer, the aluminum hissing protest. The first bitter sip brought back the memory of his 20th anniversary at Grayson. The supervisors had given him a cheap plaque and a coupon for one free turkey at the Piggly Wiggly. He'd framed the plaque anyway. The infomercial cut to a testimonial. "I bought my first property with just $3,000. Franklin's gaze drifted to the severance check drying on the coffee table. The ink had run slightly where the rain had caught it. He reached for the notepad he used for grocery lists, turned to a fresh page. The help wanted ads in the Daily Chronicle were slim pickings for a 64-year-old welder with a bad knee. Franklin circled 3 possibilities in red pen. Overnight security at the mall, $9.25 per hour, must provide own uniform. Plumber's assistant, no experience necessary, which Franklin knew meant will pay you in loose change. Scrap metal yard laborer, the ad simply said strong back required. He took all 3. The mall job lasted 11 nights. Franklin's post was outside the shuttered Sears, where he spent 8 hours watching empty escalators groan in perpetual motion. The teenage supervisor kept forgetting to schedule his breaks until Franklin planted himself in the food court and refused to move for 20 minutes. They fired him via post-it note on his locker. Plumbing paid better but smelled worse. The boss, a wheezing Vietnam vet named Donnie, had Franklin crawl under mobile homes to reconnect sewage lines. "Ain't glamorous," Donnie said around a Marlboro Red, "but shit always flows downhill and somebody's got to follow it." Franklin quit when Donnie tried to pay him with a case of expired energy drinks and a handshake. The scrapyard was the worst. The foreman, a steroid-thick neck named Vince, made Franklin sort through razor-edge piles of metal without proper gloves. "Lot of guys would kill for this work," Vince said, as Franklin bandaged a gash on his forearm. That afternoon, Franklin found Vince's office unlocked and the payroll ledger open. He noted how much Grayson Steel got per ton for their scrap. Did some math on a greasy napkin. At the library, the ancient Dell computers hummed like beehives. Franklin squinted at the property records database, fingers clumsy on the keyboard. The librarian, a soft-faced woman with "I love cats" on her lanyard, showed him how to search LLC filings. "Research project?" she asked. "Something like that," Franklin said, copying down an address in shaky capitals. That night, over a dinner of rice and 2 scrambled eggs, Marla called again. Franklin let it ring. The notepad by his plate now held property tax delinquencies, sheriff's auction dates, Grayson Steel lease, expiration November 30th. He stirred his coffee with a screwdriver from his toolbox. The metal clinked like a tiny hammer striking an anvil. The county records office smelled like stale coffee and photocopier toner. Franklin stood at the counter, his fingers tapping in irregular rhythm against the laminate as he waited for the clerk to return. The wall clock ticked loudly in the silence. 3:58 p.m. If he didn't get what he needed today, he'd have to wait until Monday. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with Darlene printed on her name tag in Comic Sans font, dropped the thick folder with a thud that sent dust motes swirling in the afternoon light, slanting through the blinds. "Grayson Steel Holdings, LLC," she said, pushing her glasses up her nose. "You'll want to look at the 1992 transfer documents first." Franklin's hands trembled slightly as he flipped through the brittle pages. The legal jargon swam before his eyes. Lessee obligations, triple net clauses, option to purchase, until he found the golden nugget buried on page 37. Lessor, Magnolia Properties, LLC. Lessee shall have no equity interest in premises regardless of tenure or improvements made. He nearly laughed. All those years watching Grayson Big Shot strut around like they owned the place, and they'd been renting the whole damn time, just like him in his shitty apartment. Darlene leaned over conspiratorially. "You know, honey, if you're looking for the current owner," she tapped a pink fingernail on a recent filing. "Magnolia sold to a holding company last year, Wilmington Trust as trustee." Franklin's stomach dropped. Corporate shell games. But then Darlene winked and slid a sticky note across the counter. In loopy handwriting it read, "Wilmington equals Harold Brimley. 214 Magnolia Street owes $38,000 in back taxes." Franklin stared at the note, then at Darlene. "My nephew works in the tax office," she said, already turning to help the next person. "Good luck with your, research." The late afternoon sun hit Franklin's face as he stepped outside, the sticky note burning a hole in his pocket. For the first time since they'd walked him out of Grayson, he felt the embers of something other than rage. The pawn shop bell jingled like a bad Christmas carol when Franklin pushed through the door. Behind the bulletproof glass, a teenager with face tattoos glanced up from his phone before recognition flickered across his face. "Mr. Cole, damn, my pop used to..." "I know what he used to," Franklin cut in, setting the black velvet box on the counter. The engagement ring inside caught the fluorescent light, the diamond still throwing sparks after 42 years. Martha had worn it until the cancer made her fingers too thin. The kid, Jamal, according to his name tag, whistled low. This is that old school quality right here. His gold tooth flashed as he examined the setting. I could maybe do 2,800? Franklin's jaw tightened. He'd paid 3 months' wages for that ring in 1978. 35, and I want first right to buy back. Jamal chewed his lip, then nodded. Next stop, First Mercantile Bank. Franklin's dress shoes, polished for the occasion, clicked too loud on the marble floor. The loan officer, a baby-faced white kid who couldn't be older than Marla, kept adjusting his tie as he reviewed the paperwork. Mr. Cole, with your, situation, the kid said, eyeing Franklin's severance check stub, we typically require collateral beyond just the, pawn receipts. Franklin slid another document across the desk. His hands didn't shake. Paid off life insurance policy, Martha's death benefit. The banker blanched at the amount. Sir, are you certain? I'm certain Grayson Steele's lease expires November 30th, Franklin said. And I'm certain Harold Brimley will take 70 cents on the dollar for that tax lien. Silence. The banker's pen tapped nervously against his coffee mug. World's best dad, just like Franklin's old one. Outside, thunder rumbled. Franklin remembered teaching Marla to play poker at this very bank's lobby table when she was 6. Sometimes you gotta go all in on a pair of twos, baby girl. The banker stamped APPROVED. The law office of Brimley and Associates smelled like cigar smoke and lemonwood polish. Franklin sat stiffly in a leather chair that creaked whenever he shifted his weight, watching Harold Brimley's sausage fingers flip through the purchase agreement. The old man's cufflinks, tiny gold scales of justice, winked under the Tiffany lamp. You realize what you're buying, right? Brimley chuckled, mopping his forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief. That building's got more asbestos than bricks. Tenants been complaining about the roof since Clinton was president. Franklin kept his face neutral. He'd spent 3 nights studying the building inspection reports from the library, memorizing every code violation like Bible verses. I'll take my chances. Brimley's lawyer, a skeletal woman with frost-tipped hair, pushed forward a rider clause. Standard provision regarding existing leases. Of course, Grayson Steele's tenancy runs through month to month, Franklin interrupted. He tapped the addendum he'd brought. Their long-term lease expired last November. They've been operating on automatic renewals. The room went still. Brimley's jowls quivered. How the hell do you know that? Franklin allowed himself a small smile. He remembered Grayson's CFO bragging at the 2012 Christmas party about renegotiating all their properties to flexible terms. The idiot had been too drunk to notice Franklin refilling his punch cup. The frost-haired lawyer cleared her throat. We could contest, or, Franklin said, sliding his cashier's check across the mahogany desk. You could take this and finally settle your back taxes before the county seizes your wife's Boca Raton condo. Brimley turned the color of raw liver. Franklin had found that particular detail in Darlene's second sticky note. The signing took 12 minutes. Franklin initialed every page with deliberate strokes, the pen heavy in his hand. When it was done, Brimley shoved the keys across the desk with a sound like falling chains. Hope you enjoy being a landlord, Cole. Grayson's VP eats guys like you for breakfast. Franklin pocketed the keys. They felt warm, like live ammunition. Tell me, he said, standing slowly, does he take milk with that breakfast? Outside, autumn sunlight gilded the courthouse steps. Franklin sat for a full 5 minutes just breathing, the deed burning a hole in his inside pocket. Somewhere across town, a forklift beeped in reverse. Somewhere, a foreman checked his watch. Somewhere, an HR rep typed up a new severance package. And Franklin Cole owned a building. The certified mail envelope sat on Franklin's kitchen table for 3 days before he worked up the nerve to send it. He typed the notice himself on the library computer, the keys sticking under his fingers, the printer wheezing out each page like it was in on the scheme. Termination of tenancy, 30 days notice. Simple, professional. No hint that the new landlord had once mopped the floors he was now reclaiming. Franklin's hands shook as he sealed the envelope. Not from guilt, hell no, but from the sheer weight of what came next. He'd played the scenario in his head 100 times. The outrage, the threats, the inevitable counteroffers. Grayson wouldn't go quietly. Corporations never did. He mailed it on a Tuesday. Wednesday morning, his phone rang for the first time in months. Unknown caller. Franklin let it go to voicemail. The robotic voice announced a new message as he fried eggs in the same skillet he'd used for 30 years, the cast iron seasoned with memories of Martha humming in the next room. Mr. Cole, this is Robert Duvall from Grayson Steele's legal department. We've received your notice. There seems to be some misunderstanding regarding our lease agreement. Franklin stabbed the yolk with his spatula. It bled yellow across the pan. By noon, 2 more voicemails. By 3 p.m., a courier arrived with a thick envelope marked urgent, legal documents. Franklin left it unopened on the counter beside the half-eaten eggs. That evening, he drove past the factory for the first time since they'd fired him. The parking lot was still full of the same dented Hondas and rusted Chevys. The same tired faces trudged out at shift change. Lunch pails swinging. Rodriguez spotted him from across the lot and froze mid-step. Franklin rolled down his window just enough to let out a stream of cigarette smoke. "Tell your boys not to unpack any new equipment," he called. Rodriguez's grin split the dusk like a lightning strike. Back home, the legal envelope glowed white under the kitchen lights. Franklin poured 2 fingers of bourbon, the good stuff he'd been saving for retirement, and finally slid it open. Inside, a settlement offer for triple his purchase price. Franklin toasted the empty room, drank deep, and tossed the paperwork in the trash.